Hey everyone, this is Clay with Nanobot Rock, bringing you the best local and independent music from around the world. This week we talk about Reborn by Ali Holder, Wilson by The Opposite, Ginkgo Biloba by Rone, In Soft Confusion by Houses of Heaven, and Snow Angel by Braids. Some of the other things we'll be talking about are Genres Without Borders, Guns N' Roses, Country or Not Country, and Throwing Volleyballs into the Void. This is the Nanobot Rock Mixtape.
Interesting fun fact about me. I was voted most likely to be a radio DJ in high school. True story.
Yeah.
And when I was in high school, had the opportunity to go into the studio with Dan Mitchell from Denver. And he was on, I think it was 96.5, 98.5, like 98.9. I can't remember where it was on the dial, but I went into the studio with him and I'm sitting there and he goes, sit right here in this other seat across the desk from him. And it's playing the commercials. We can hear it in the studio and everything. He takes the microphone and goes, whoom, and spins it around at me. And it comes on the air and he goes, I'm in the studio here with Greg from, I'm not going to say my high school because I don't want people to track me down. But he put me on the air and he goes, so Greg, what do you think of being on the radio? And I went, it's cool. And that was it. I was this terrified teenager, and then everyone was like, oh my god, Greg was on the radio, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, no, the same thing happened to me. It was TOS 105.1, I want to say, in Maine, and yeah, it was the same thing of me and two of my friends went and we called it, we're gonna go job shadow at the radio station. And that basically just turned into us going to hang out with the local DJs that we idolized, and seeing the cool room where they had styrofoam up on the wall, and they just took records and spun them as fast as they could up in the air and stuck them into the styrofoam.
Take this, Anne Murray.
Yeah. Well, and then learning the whole way that they do all their music, and then next thing we know, he's like, "Okay, I'm back from break, and I've got these three clowns from this school, and same thing. What do you guys think of this? It's pretty cool."
And then you go back to school the next day, I was on the radio, yo. Yeah. Everyone's, I want your autograph. You're on the radio. I remember that kind of pull back the curtain on the radio thing. And there was they were doing one of those on location spots. And the guy had called in before he was going to do the live on air piece of it. He's like, it took me 45 minutes to find this place. I can't find the street. It's stupid. And I can't believe I'm out here and it's hot and I'm tired of this crap. And then he comes on the air and he's like, it's really easy to find. Just follow the signs and you'll get there in no time. And we're in the background just laughing, oh, we know the truth.
Our peel back the curtain thing was the calling in of the, hey, can you play Bob Seger for me? Sure, Bob, we'll get that. Bob again. Haha. Yeah, I'm good with the names. Sure, we'll get that on the radio. And then he records that and he's like, all right, so I already know everything I'm going to play for the day. So whenever I get to a point where I'm actually going to play Bob Seger, I will play that at the beginning, and then I'll make that guy's day or whatever. And the other piece was, hey, this is Jimmy. I want to hear, Led Zeppelin. And he was like, all right, Jimmy, what are you doing right now? Oh, I'm just drinking a beer, having a great time. Oh, cool. I'm so glad you're ready to rock and roll. Thanks, Jimmy. Bye. God, what a loser.
I remember there was this alternative station, and it was probably mid-90s in Denver, and all these kids were off of school. I think it was spring break or summer break or something like that. And finally one of the DJs comes back. She's like, look, I get that you guys are at home, and I get that you're bored. Would you please just stop calling and requesting the same song 500 times? I'm not going to play it for you anymore this week. Just stop calling me. And that was live on the radio. I was going to reply her.
I refuse to play Hamster Dance. Please stop asking me to play.
This is all going into the episode, by the way.
Oh, of course it is.
Which is a great segue from Hamster Dance to our listeners and the people that have been supporting us so far.
Because when I think of our listeners, I think of...
I called the March Divide... I did not call the March Divide audio toilet paper, but there's a connection that could be made there. So let's just keep digging holes. We're getting good at that. But all of our listeners, all of the people that have been supporting us as we've done this, want to say thank you sincerely. We had a great response, especially the last episode. And we're going to keep doing this because we love music and we love really just anything goes here. And we love all types of music. And without the support, we wouldn't know how this is being received. And we've gotten a lot of really good support and response, especially from Peak Demographic, our last episode. So I wanted to say thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I am really, really, really pleased with the response that we got. It's been really cool to hear, not even from the fans, but from the artists as well. I think, I don't know, maybe an hour after we published the episode, that Outsider basically put us on blast. You know, like, look at this great podcast that Nanobot put out on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube. Like, he just kind of like did this whole media blitz on everything that we did, which was just kind of like, it's kind of, you know, you kind of want to go be like, same at you, buddy, because I'm just so impressed with the music that he put out, and for him to be so impressed with what we're doing, it's kind of one of those cool mutual moments.
It is cool, and it shows, I think it reveals the fact that these artists are creating this great music that we're appreciating, but they're also fans at the same time. And I think one of the responses that he got as well was that he loved the music that was on Peak Demographic on the last episode, and he's coming into this as a fan as well. And there's a lot of that, and we've been doing this for almost 10 years now, and we've talked to all sorts of different artists from all different walks of life over that period of time. And I'm not going to say it gets less, I don't know how to phrase it, but I guess basically I still get the proverbial starstruck when I meet an artist that I've been just obsessing over their EP or their LP or just even a single. If there's something that really moves you and everything, and then you get to meet the person, the mind behind it all, I still kind of fanboy out on that, just kind of, oh my gosh, yeah, this is awesome. And to be able to meet them and things. And so it's really, really cool to have the response from all of our listeners. It's really cool to have that response from the artists themselves as well. And we're making a connection with their music, and they're making a connection with what we're doing. And across the world, we're going, hey, yeah, we're liking the same thing. This is awesome, because we just kind of throw this out there and hope that it connects with a couple of people, and we've had an amazing response to this, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah, I can never get over when one of the artists is like, I'm blown away by what you wrote, and I'm like, well, you're blown away by something that I did when you're the one creating all this great music in the world. So that's just always been a weird feeling, and I'll never get tired of it. But the other cool thing about it is when, you know, the whole impetus of this was to help people discover music, and when you've got bands discovering other bands on this, and like, you know, Outsider saying like, I'm a fan of Andy Hamilton now, like that's a really cool moment to me as well.
It is really cool. And I'm in the same vein. Artists that'll say, hey, I really liked what you wrote about this. My response has always kind of been, well, you had the hard job.
Yeah.
Like the music is just speaking these words through me, sort of thing, in a weird kind of way, but it's I feel like the artist has the hard job, so then they look at us and say, hey, that's really cool, kind words that you put together. But it's they have the hard job. I mean, to organically come up with all this stuff. And yes, we're a product of our influence, so there's some sort of back of your mind shadow of what you were listening to when you were 9 years old, running around on your Walkman sort of thing, happening in your subconscious as you're putting this together. But they construct these sounds, and that's much harder than what we're doing. So all the love and all the praise to them for sure.
Absolutely. So with that said, we've put together so this is now our second month of mixtapes, and we kind of break them into 3 chunks. And as people can kind of see, we're not really saying like, we're just going to put together a rock and roll mixtape or a, you know, electronic mixtape. Like, we're basically trying to cross genres on all of this, and some of those genres bridge with each other really nicely. Like, I mean, I think of we did, you know, Peel Dream magazine a couple weeks ago, and then we've got another band that was influenced by shoegaze on this episode. So there is that kind of thread throughout it. But anybody who's looking for, well, I just want a Americana mixtape, I mean, you're not going to get that here, just because we're trying to be genres without borders.
Genres without borders. I feel like that needs to be on a shirt. So I'm gonna throw this out there. Do you remember Mad TV, that show that was on way back when? Absolutely love that show. There was this short-lived sketch that was a very slow, like, Greg, did you really ask me that look? So they can't see it, but Clay just gave me this look.
No, you didn't even give me a chance to answer. I mean, what if I said, no, I don't remember that? Then that would have been a whole other conversation.
Clay, do you remember Mad TV?
Can you repeat the question?
What are the origins of speech? Greek.
I defer to the gentleman from Idaho. No, yes, I do remember Mad TV. I didn't watch it religiously, but I did watch it. So there's a chance that I do remember whatever you're about to talk about, and there may be a chance that I don't.
Well, and now I'm starting to wonder if I made this all up in my head, because I went back and I tried to find this for some other thing a few months back. Oh, a
Mandela effect.
Exactly. And
is it Berenstein Bears or Berenstain Bears?
Berenstein Bears.
Oh, a rebel.
A rebel, Dottie, but that was a former episode. There was a sketch that was pretty short-lived on Mad TV where this guy would come out in basically like a bath towel, and he would just rant about things that he hated. And he would go, you know what I hate? And then he'd launch into something, and you know what I hate? And then he'd launch into something, kind of a Peter Griffin, what really grinds my gears kind of thing. But there was just this one moment where he's going on, and he's building up, and you know what I hate? And then he'd say something, you know what I hate? And then he'd go, you know what I hate? That guy right there. And then he'd point to a guy in the audience. But all I can think of is that moment in the back of my head, because I'm going to say this. You know what I hate, Clay? Genres. I hate this need to put sounds in silos that have sub-silos within those silos. And it's that nesting doll moment where people are going to now look at grain silos and go, is there a smaller silo inside that? No. But it's this, well, we're going to have indie as a genre. Indie is not a genre per se. And I'll respect that, because you could get to indie pop, you could get to indie rock, but I think that the indie overarch kind of came from a Radiohead sound that people just went, this doesn't sound like what we're used to, let's call it indie, and now it's this whole thing. Then there's... Well,
it's the same way that alternative came about, and it was like, well, it was an alternative to something, but then it, you know, because it was basically the alternative to glam, or the alternative to pop, and the alternative to, you know, classic rock. You know, it was its own thing at that time. And then it just became like this whole large monster where, you know, the joke was always like, well, an alternative to what? You know, because that's what it was. It became the mainstream.
But then it has the staying power of those radio stations that are like 80s, 90s, and today. Like, that was cool in 2006. But now that we're 20 years in, what is today? Because you're doing 80s, 90s, and then only songs that came out in 2019. Then why are we playing Imagine Dragons kind of thing? You know what I mean? So it doesn't have a staying power to call it alternative or to call it whatever. But then you get into even more of it, and it's I guess the easiest go-to would be metal, because there's metal, there's thrash metal, there's thrashcore, there's death metal, and then people break it down. And if you're really into that, by all means, go ahead and do it. Just know that I don't get it. And I'm not trying to throw my credibility card on the table here and say, challenge me. What I'm saying is, if it's metal, then how can you define it as thrash death metal but not death metal? It's thrash death metal. It's not thrash metal. How are you fusing that? Because then the lines become so blurred. And I'm not a fan of diving deep into genres, because I think that when you do that, you're trying to label the music, and then I think you're detracting something from the song or artist that you're listening to.
Yeah, and I think we ran into this a lot with one of our favorite discoveries from way back when, a band called Idola, that they are well defined as a post-core band. And I've seen them twice, and I've, you know, basically, with all due respect to the other bands, after Idola's done, I'm like, I'm good. You know, like, I don't need to listen to somebody else trying to do this other thing that I don't really want to hear. Like, I want to hear this one band who does their thing really, really well, but I don't need to listen to, you know, screaming and finger picking for the rest of the evening. Like, I've kind of got my fix of that post-core genre, if you will.
So then you would be a fan of a post-core band, but not the post-core genre?
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of like, you know, think of metal. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of people who really like Metallica, but, you know, could say, you know, I take or leave, you know, Slayer or Cannibal Corpse or any, you know, like, I'm trying to think of like the conversation from the 80s that people may be having of saying, like, I like this one, really, like, I really like Megadeth, but for the rest of them, just forget it.
I like Dio and I like Rainbows, and you're not going to do anything about it.
Yeah.
You know, since we've got a lot of love mail, I'm just going to launch into some quick hate mail on this. Metallica's really good for their openings, but after that, it's kind of like, meh. So
their openings?
Yeah, the openings of each track. It's kind of like Heart. Like, you listen to the first like minute and you're like, this is awesome, and then you're like, okay,
they got third act problems.
This and second act problems, and this is going to get all sorts of hate mail. So pile it on. But here we go. Metallica and Heart.
Yeah, here you go. Yeah, they're really going to they're really going to feel the pain of you taking down, this 30-year juggernaut.
Lars Ulrich will sue us to try and take down this episode.
Well, we did say the name, so now there's copyright infringement.
He is a publicly known entity, and therefore I'm just simply referencing for a point of reference. Let's see, I can't think of another word. Anyway, so genres, as we were talking about, I've never been a fan of it. I can't dive into it. And there is this whole argument, and I think that it becomes almost elitist. So if you're like me, if you're the kind of person that likes to understand the superficial take on a genre, kind of that cursory view of a genre, that's fine. You don't need to be defined by your ability to go 12 levels in. This isn't science class where you have the genus, the species, and the family, and everything else that you need to dive into.
Well, but everything is kind of like accounting. Everybody wants to put things in their own box. And a lot of that comes down to, like, I really like country. Not me. I'm just talking about the proverbial person here that says, so they're not going to go pursue a metal band because that is not what they are after. But they may like a Guns N' Roses because they kind of cross that barrier in a way. You know what I mean?
Guns N' Roses is country? Well, let's step back and let's talk about the fact that you're in Texas and you don't like country. Let's get that out there. I'm tired of getting all the hate mail. So elaborate on that for a moment.
I didn't choose the Texas life. The Texas life chose me.
I feel like you guys have shirts, or maybe is it embroidered on a Stetson out there? I can't tell.
Well,
wow.
It's, yeah.
I'm in so much trouble with Texas and Metallica.
I'm here. There's really good food here.
There is. And so you bridge country to Guns N' Roses. That's true.
Well, yeah, but I mean, okay. So I'm trying to draw on personal experience here of, yeah, I don't like country, but I have family members who do. And I had family members who also really like Guns N' Roses. And they said, well, they're in a way, they're a country band. And some of that is just listening to some of, I don't know, maybe it was the Lies album, or something to that effect, where you've got Patience and it's kind of has a little bit of a more country twang to it. But there's something else there in the music. If you just go and listen to it, you can hear that it's not just straight up rock and roll. There's other. You're giving me the look.
I'm tired of digging my own holes, so I want you to dig out of this Guns N' Roses hole. So, Civil War, I guess, because it was a what's so civil about war anyway, and it had a Cool Hand Luke reference, so that bridges the country. I could see that. So there you go. Nanobot Rock officially states that Guns N' Roses is a country band, and you are welcome.
Okay,
hate mail goes to info@nanobotrock.com.
Now you're putting words in my mouth. I never said Guns N' Roses was country. I said that they bridged to country.
Speaking of country, this is America, so we put words in your mouth.
Bithia.
Bridge to country Bithia, but without the sad part, right? Because that's.
I never saw the movie.
Oh, it's got a sad part. Don't watch.
Don't at me.
Don't at you. So country. Speaking of, I think that there's probably maybe a no more fitting way to arc into our first track, because the first track comes from somebody who's in this country. So there you go. There's the tie-in by Greg. More specifically from Austin, Texas. I'm talking about Ali Holder. The Uncomfortable Truths album came out April 10th. And okay, there is a tie-in here to kind of that country sense. But I would argue that it's more of that Americana vein, because when I'm listening to Ali Holder's Reborn, I'm thinking Brandi Carlile and the Highwomen missed the member that they were looking for when they put that new supergroup together, and I think that missing member is Ali Holder. There's a sense of Americana, kind of in the vein that we would find on an independent level of The Still Tide, with the vocal delivery and that just beautiful execution of the voice. But it's truly Americana in that it really makes you feel and makes you get into that, and it's telling this story that a lot of people don't want to necessarily talk about, but there's a sense of empowerment here as well.
Well, I never believed I was good enough, like I deserved every bad thing I got. Yeah, living with pain will make you tough. I'm finally old You learn to live small and to distrust yourself. Yeah, no one wants to hear it, so they shut you down. No one wants to see your weakness, no one wants to feel down. So I held my breath and I held my tongue. My body a battleground trample. Yeah, the pain ran round, but fears it won. I refuse to be the victim, I refuse to be shunned.
Okay, I'm gonna go back to the Greg doesn't like genres moment here, and talk about Americana in general, because I'm listening to this track, and and maybe it's my Guns N' Roses country stretch here, but I pick up on a lot of those country tones in this song, but I keep getting this feeling that Americana is just this genre that we created because like we secretly want to call things country, but country has just become this kind of like alternative became this monster behemoth. Like country is now its own like insular community of pop stars that basically just sing with a twang and have cowboy hats. Wow, there's the word I was looking for. Is all these artists have these cowboy hats, and for other people to try and get into that community, it's not really going to work unless they know the secret knock to get in. So they basically just say, well, I'm an Americana artist.
So Brandi Carlile's from the Seattle area. I haven't seen anybody with a cowboy hat in Seattle, but you're saying because of the fact that she's not from the South, that she can't be country, or that it's just not country enough?
No, it's more like, does Brandi Carlile go to the CMAs?
I don't know, because honestly, I haven't watched the CMAs.
Exactly. No, but for people to try and break into that genre, it seems like there's harder inroads to that. So, you kind of branch out more into this Americana type thing, which, and maybe I'm completely wrong, and feel free to send, your hate mail to me on this one as well. But it just feels like Americana is this other identity we created for country artists who aren't country.
Or would one argue that Americana is the evolution of American folk?
One could argue that.
Or is country the evolution of...
Is one going to argue that?
Yeah, you know what? Let's argue that maybe the Americana is simply the evolution of folk, because folk was the narrative of storytelling for a very, very, very long time. And speaking of genres, since we're going to just go down this rabbit hole for a second here, folk was a way to tell stories. So you get the Pete Seegers, you get the Peter, Paul, and Marys, you get these folk artists that reworked songs that have been told before as a way of communicating the history behind them all. So there is a much more of a storytelling than there is in the modern evolution of country, which is the jokingly pickup truck, ex-wife, dog reference, not all in one.
But sometimes in one.
But folk has been a way of storytelling, and Ali Holder, especially in Reborn, it tells a story. And I guess there's no easy way to say it without it sounding like we're coming down on country. And I'll be the first to admit it. There is a lot of really good country music out there. I still listen to some country music from time to time. It needs to have that solid grasp around the heart and the storytelling. I think the lines between country and Americana have become blended too much. And to your point, I think you're spot on with your idea of Americanas for what we can't facilitate as country right now. It doesn't sound country enough, so we're going to call it Americana. But I would say that Americana at its core is the modern version of folk. And Ali Holder's Reborn speaks to that. I think that it plays to this folk narrative in a really good way. It's almost as if Reborn is the antithesis to Tammy Wynette's Stand By Your Man. It's almost as if stood by the man, and you know what? No more. I'm going to get reborn, and I'm going to do this. And she sings these incredibly emotional pieces. It's the song about being pushed down emotionally and then finding yourself being reborn in a way. And she sings pain will change you from the inside out, and how she feels that, quote, no one wants to hear it, so they'll shut you down. No one wants to see your weakness. Those lines stood out to me immensely with this song.
Well, and she even calls it out on her page about that Reborn is also about dealing with chronic pain. And yeah, sometimes people don't want to hear it. You know, it's like the whole like, well, if you're depressed, go out, you know, go get some fresh air. Well, if you're depressed, you don't want to get out. That's the point. So it's trying to listen, you know, get past a lot of this narrative, and she does that in a really great way. And I'm trying to remember the line at the end right now about how she basically just like everything just catches fire and she gets through it. And, you know, it's the whole line of watch me be reborn, you know, whether you want to call it a phoenix imagery or not, that comes out of all of that. But talking through all of this pain, at some point there's got to be some sort of release, and that comes out really well in this track.
With my reference to Stand By Your Man, the Tammy Wynette antithesis point, it's not a direct male, female, husband, wife kind of scenario. It's just this idea of enough's enough, and you don't have to fall into this one category. And maybe it's the most fitting track when we're talking about genres as well, because it doesn't fit into its own category. It becomes its own thing. And she sings the line, so I held my breath and I held my tongue, my body a battleground trampled. I refused to be the victim. I refused to be shunned. And then she was quoted as saying, you can choose to focus on the negative or the positive, and she is making the choice for the positive. So to me, Reborn is a profound reflection of self-empowerment that's come to by wading through this pain and no longer choosing to ignore it. You have to face it, but you'll come out the other side reborn and more, I think, the better for it.
Always fighting with my body, fighting with my mind. There's a hunger in my heart that was given to me. Sleeps with me at night and wakes me in the morning. I was born to be a bridge, insatiable as I sing. Bridge between the truth that heals us and the truth that stings. Finally, my heart caught fire. Rage on my own funeral pyre. Watch me be reborn.
Reborn to me, in that vein of folk country fused into this Americana. Reborn is played in the sense of Americana. It is largely vocally downplayed in a song that has a lot to say lyrically, but it's almost understated the way that she delivers it, and it just feels like it wants to scream out and it doesn't quite get there. But it's incredibly moving, it's incredibly refreshing, and you cheer for her as we all watch her be reborn, and how she creates this anthem for others to be reborn within this track.
Well, and I think that muted thing plays out really well. I'm thinking through, you know, the music that's kind of going in the background as, you know, her vocals are going on. And I mean, you can pick up, there's the acoustic guitar going on, but there's also this really great, I don't want to say organ, but keyboard, you know, there's a keyboard kind of doing its own thing in the background, like very muted, but then there's it gets into a couple little cool lilts in there, but the whole track seems very understated to that point. And, you know, I've actually went and listened to the rest of this album, and I think that's where I kind of got into this whole thing of like, I listened to this track and I'm like, well, this inherently feels like some kind of Americana country track, but then you listen to the rest of it and there's a lot of blues going on, there's a lot of jazz, there's a lot of other stuff that's going on, that this song is kind of like a nice gateway into understanding the rest of her talent. Like she's got a lot of talent in there, in that album.
She does, and I think years from now we're going to come back and we'll maybe individually revisit Allie Holder and realize what's set in motion from all this. She's a beautiful songwriter and immensely talented. And Uncomfortable Truths by Allie Holder is out. It was out April 10th. Go check out Reborn and Uncomfortable Truths.
Well, I never believed I was good enough. Like I deserved every bad thing I got. Yeah, living with
Speaking of country, Clay, let's go to another one. Another country. That's the best segue that I could think of here. And I'm talking,
your transition gave me whiplash.
There you go. It's we take really sharp turns here, unapologetically sharp turns, which is fine. I am talking about the trio from Switzerland, The Opposite. The trio from Switzerland were formed in 2017, but their debut album just came out this year in 2020. And the first thing that comes to mind when I'm talking about The Opposite's Wilson is this is one of my favorite types of music. It's a story. It tells a story from beginning to end of a character who ultimately, I guess his end result is kind of left to your interpretation with this particular track. But it kind of reminds me of the old songwriting of like Shooting Star by Bad Company, where they're telling the story of this individual as the song goes on. They're not necessarily coming back to revisit any line or verse per se, but they're constantly telling this growing story of it. And this is one of my favorite types of music, and I think that this is very, very well executed. And when you understand that this was inspired by their work in the film industry, all of a sudden Wilson becomes a lot clearer to you.
Wilson's out for more. Never takes the hand of anyone. Always prepared for his own personal war.
Was there anything in particular in the film industry that kind of led to that, like, kind of narrowing the gap on understanding there, or was it just that you think that they're thinking about this kind of in terms of a movie narrative, if you will?
Well, I think in storytelling and in instrument, this is a very cinematic blend of sound.
Okay.
It's telling the story and it's growing on itself musically and lyrically, and it captured my attention without break for the full 3.5 minutes in the way that a really good film would as well. And I think that the cinematic construct that they achieved really, I guess, is that nod to their film industry experience.
And I could see that because listening to the song, just thinking of, and to kind of get into the story about, this guy Wilson, who's either self-perceived as this really great guy that's up and coming and, kind of shooting down all his opponents one by one, and then in some kind of, I'm guessing, like psychic break, just basically, up and leaves his family and completely disappears. But in the imagery that they use, just kind of like shooting at everyone. And I think of the line specifically about how he steps into the void. It's a great metaphor, but I really enjoy the song much more if I think about it literally. Like if he's literally stepping into the void, like how much more fun the song becomes.
Another glorious day of shooting at everything that moves. Yeah! What an outstanding performance. This highly regarded guy constantly improves. You cannot reach me. I'm too far ahead now. No one would ever have expected that he could lose control one day. The day he left his wife and children, he just stopped the car and walked away.
See, and this is the point I meant with the open to interpretation, is that to me, you could perceive that he just has a psychic break and decides to leave? Or did he just step on the wrong person's toes and they find his wallet and they find his cards and his briefcase and all of that? There's a line in this track though that the first time I heard it, I LOL'd.
You lolled.
I lulled, I rafflecoptered it. But it's this line that I absolutely love, and they sing it, and it's, "This highly regarded guy constantly improves."
Yeah, I love that line.
That line speaks, and it's making me happy with just that line. Like, yay, let's talk about this line. But it's this, you're hearing this story of Handsome Wilson, and when you say shooting the wrong people, I immediately get like the shooter. What was his name? Shooter McGavin from Happy Gilmore, that doing the gun finger thing. And you got, everyone kind of knows that guy that walks around and say, hey, and does the thing with his fingers. And you're like, I hate that guy. Like, he comes in on a Monday, he's like, hey, smiling. And you're just like,
are you hard at work or hardly working?
Somebody's got a case of the Mondays. But it's that kind of, the whole song leaves so much of it to your imagination, and that's probably the cinematic piece to it as well, that it's laying down this foundation, and it's giving you the characters, and it's giving you this overall vibe to move with, but ultimately you're creating this in your own mind, who Wilson was, what he looks like, what he's actually doing. And this highly regarded guy constantly improves is probably the most on point line that you could think of, but it seems so basic in literal interpretation.
Yeah, it almost becomes a throwaway line that you're like, no, this is the best part of the whole thing.
You're like, no, wait. And then if somebody talks over it, you got to go back and listen to it again. Like,
we're going to go listen back to the good part.
You will listen to this highly regarded guy. And there is this thick, independent presence with this track, but I really feel they've got one foot firmly planted in the 80s. So when you tie it all together of this Handsome Wilson and this highly regarded guy constantly improving, in the 80s, all of a sudden I'm taken back to those films like the guys in Weekend at Bernie's that are wearing the polos on the weekends, the James Spader and Mannequin kind of guys, like, that are just they're wearing the collared shirt and everybody hates them kind of thing. And so there's this tie-in to me that creates this imagery that I just find so fascinating with this track.
Yeah, it's a great kind of, I want to use the word avant-garde because I feel like that kind of helps get that, like, they're on the outside looking in on some of these shooter types that you're talking about, and the whole thing just comes in with this great, I mean, I'm going to call it alternative because that's kind of where it lands, but there's a little bit of that 80s pop to it as well with some of the synth that's going on, but there's great guitar licks that kind of come in and you just have a great little kind of psychedelic twang to them as well.
And those guitars though, to me, were and maybe alternative to that point is on point. Let's say point a couple more times just so that it's on point and the point is driven home to the point that you can't stand point.
Point taken.
But it is that guitar at the breakdowns, especially with that guitar, it speaks to almost that mid 90s alternative, kind of maybe late 90s, like Fastball. If you remember the band Fastball, was kind of that same guitar work. So it is spanning several decades with everything kind of coming in at once, and that melodic synth that you talked about, the claps, and then the infectious na you cannot reach me. It's a sing-along, but then it's almost, hey, this is great. Wait, where's Wilson? And not in a Tom Hanks, like, crying into the ocean kind of Wilson way.
He stepped into the void.
Wait a minute, did we just figure out that Wilson is a volleyball?
He stepped into the void and then stepped into the body of the beach ball and became the personality for Tom Hanks to talk to.
The opposite. Wilson.
He couldn't help but walk into the void. A few weeks later they found his suitcase, his phone and credit cards and documents destroyed.
I think it goes without saying that we've touched on some kind of heavy subjects so far, and we will continue to throughout this mixtape. So it feels nice to have a little bit of an audio palette cleanser, if you will, in a instrumental electronic track. And I couldn't think of a better way to just kind of pause and breathe for a moment than to listen to Rone's Ginkgo Biloba, which is off his new album Room with a View, which came out on April 24th. Rone is a Parisian electronic artist, and I believe this is his, I want to say it's his 5th album, and the first one that he's done without, or the first one that he's done since I believe his first album, where he doesn't have, you know, some kind of accompanist with him or a collaborator, because I mean he's collaborated with everyone from Greta Thunberg to Saul Williams to Kazu and Battles. So he's been in some pretty interesting company, and this is just a album where he's doing his own thing. It was an interesting way how he was inspired by this. This was with a collaboration with the Théâtre du Châtelet in Paris, working with the collective La Horde and 20 dancers of the Ballet National de Marseille, where they inspired each other in a way where he, you know, was kind of creating this music for this group, and the group was creating the interpretation to that, and they both just kind of dove into the music together and created this really interesting sound. And I think the way that this track portrays itself is, I don't know if you listen to a lot of like late 80s new age music, but it kind of has some of that. It's a very meditative song to me.
So late 80s new age music. Do you have an example or two for those that might want to dig in and learn a little bit more of that?
One that jumps out to me in particular is a band called Kitaro, and it's just, and you know, I know when people think of new age music, that is a lot of like the jangly bells or didgeridoos, or you know, kind of some of just, you know, that lulling music that you will sometimes hear in like a massage envy, if you will. And this to me is more of kind of that. It's a very worldly sound that, like, every time I listen to it, I just get into a trance-like state.
And going even further back than the 80s, I could say that this could almost pair into that sense of kind of what Jade Warrior was achieving even before that. And I think what it boils down to, especially with the construct that is this album, this song, to the ballet that's occurring, is creating a physical art medium with an audible art medium. And it's interesting because it almost becomes this art versus science type situation where they collide at these crossroads, because there's so much precision that needs to happen here, but it comes out so almost organically. And Clay, you've referenced before your quote-unquote headphone music, where you get a good set of headphones and you're listening to something and it becomes even better on that. And this is, I think, one of the tracks that really, really fits that sense, that Well, it is precisely that. It's a headphone music. You absolutely cannot gain a full appreciation for this track without a decent set of headphones. This isn't something that you could play on a small speaker and try and appreciate. You get some good headphones or you get some good speakers, something that you can play it to where you can hear the layers and hear the background, because it's this orchestral embodiment of that electronic music. But it's that the electronic music is kind of a sheer backdrop to this modern ballet within your own psyche, is what I feel that this really develops.
I think of that in particular, because there's just the general, like, it's a very repetitive track in general, where there's kind of that same chord progression that's going on throughout the entire song, but then there'll be a different percussion that's on top of it, or there'll be, like, there's this one great point where you hear kind of that repetitive going on, and then they just throw in this really deep bass in the background, which is really, like you said, if you've got the right headphones, it just pops out at you so much.
And to the narrative that this is a modern ballet within your own psyche, that bass that you were talking about drops these heavy shadows. They're just these deeply seated waves of bass that pair with an airy brass that occurs within the song as well. And that brass is almost like it's dancing in these beams of light that it creates within itself, while the bass is ominously floating in these shadows at the back of the stage, and it creates this depth and this vision within this track for me that I just was consumed by. And the more I listen to this, the more I just want to sit in its presence and just simply appreciate the world that it crafts.
Going back to the fact that this was influenced by ballet and vice versa, I've never been a big ballet guy, but I kind of want to see a ballet that's influenced by electronic music. I mean, don't you?
That would be phenomenal. I would buy a ticket to that in a heartbeat. Skrillex doing
Greg
Swan
and Clay
Lake.
are going to Paris.
Allons-y. That's about the only third word in French that I remember.
À tout à l'heure.
Je suis le singe. That was probably a very butchered way of saying I am a monkey. Rone, Ginkgo, Biloba is a beautiful piece, but it's out April 24th, and it is his 5th album, like you said.
Gliding out of the nice electronic ambience of Rone, I thought I would take things back to one of my favorite periods of time when I would go to, I'm sure I told you about this before, I used to go to Goth Night every week at a dance club in Portland, Maine. This was the early 2000s, and so it was basically just an excuse to go out, wear black clothes, drink some drinks, and then listen to industrial and goth music. I remember this time very, very fondly, and some of that may be, you may be surprised, but one of the most lively and exciting, happy bunch of people to be around is goths after a night of dancing at 3 a.m. at a Denny's, after they've had several drinks.
Can you, if you have a picture of you on Goth Night or dressed in all black?
Oh, no, there are no pictures.
Can you please,
Trust me, there are no pictures.
If you knew Clay from Goth Night in Portland,
there
Maine,
are no pictures.
And you have a picture of him dressed in this goth.
I recuse myself from this conversation.
I think that we would like to see that. Please send that photo to info@nanobotrock. Attention, Greg. The headline could be Guns N' Roses' Country Goth Night with Clay. I'm very interested.
There may have been one shiny shirt, but there were definitely no fishnets or anything like that. No eyeliner. It was just me like going to hang out with my friends, and I was like, hey, I got this black t-shirt I can put on.
Portland, Maine Goth Night. I mean, on one hand, I'm going...
Zoots was in a fantastic club.
But I'm thinking, like, is this some, like... Nor'easter Footloose story that we're about to hear, or is this because then Maine's got like, okay, you guys have like legitimate dark sides to it as well. There's the history of, Stephen King.
Stephen King was,
right. So at one hand I'm like, okay, you had a goth night in Maine, woo, you rebel you, but then I'm like, okay, wait a minute, this could actually get legit goth. So okay, that's fair enough. But I'm very interested.
Americana
to see...
Gothic.
There you go.
There's a title.
How are you tying in Goth Night in Maine to this track by a band from Oakland/LA, from California?
Well, because this is exactly the type of song that I would have wanted to listen to on a night like that, because it's incredibly dancey, but it's also got that nice industrial overtones to it. But the thing that really stood out to me is that while it's got a lot of you can tell that they're completely influenced by bands like Nine Inch Nails or New Order or whoever, like a Front 242 or whoever, that all that influence is there, but the edges are so much more polished and rounder. It doesn't have that real like, oh, this is the really gritty goth grunge of the day. No, this is not your parents' goth music.
This is not your parents' goth music, and we are talking about Houses of Heavens in Soft Confusion. So when we're talking Portland, Maine, and dance goth night sort of thing, see, this song to me is like this embodiment of a dance floor, so I get that. I absolutely get that. But the track as it goes on and ultimately ends, it's kind of that moment that it winds down. You got your eyes closed, you're dancing around on this dance floor. You open your eyes and you find that you're alone with your thoughts, because there's a very deep message, I think, and I think each person will probably interpret this a little bit different in their own way. And I'm not talking like you open your eyes and all of a sudden you're floating above this dance floor with Devon Sawa a la Casper, can I keep you kind of moment dance, but this where things aren't what they seem, but it's this dance floor where you become so entrenched in this song and you become so into this song that you can almost close your eyes and just start moving around to it. But to me, it's that Depeche Mode, starts out as kind of The Cure, goes into this Depeche Mode New Order type sound.
I can see some of that going on. The thing that, again, like with the whole, like, you can't shove this into any one genre. I mean, even the band themselves talk about how they're influenced by that early industrial sound that we brought up earlier, or techno in general, but then let's just throw some shoegaze sound in there as well. And I think they even jump into some, like, there's some dub influenced items in this. So there's this whole kind of pot of danceable music that's going on in this, and you're getting a lot of that kind of synth pop with the drum track going on, but then they also do have live drumming in it as well, which pairs with it really nicely, which gives it kind of that New Order sound that you're talking about.
It does. It's that synth heavy electronic assembly riding that non-stop electro beat that's behind it. But I guess the elephant in the room here is the fact that this track is an upbeat pondering of the fallout of human extinction. So it's about the end of days sort of thing, and you're going, yeah, let's jam out to this with this electronic beat and let's dance to it. Is it that moment in Independence Day where they're all just dancing on top of the building going, yeah, take us with you, and then boom,
it could be. I mean, the whole album was basically written as a response to the California wildfires and the tent cities that were, starting to crop up in the Oakland area. And like goth came about because of all of the, issues that we were dealing with in, the recession during Bush Senior's years and the Persian Gulf War. Like that all kind of was what was in the forefront in the mind then. So you're going to, natural progression is going to be that you got all these things going on in your region that are super bumming you out. So let's create some dance tracks.
This is a daunting topic that underscores the whole track here, the whole album, really. It is a daunting topic, and it's something that a lot of people may not want to think about, but it's an all too addicting, infectious track. So does it work in your eyes that they come through with the super serious thought or narrative, if you will, into this dance track, or do you feel that Houses of Heavens and Soft Confusion has spliced too much together and they've bitten off more than they could chew?
I'll have to think about that for a second here, but I don't, because I go back to something that you said earlier of, you can't always control what people think of whatever it is that you're putting out. So if you're thinking of all of their influences together and you're thinking of all of the themes that are in the music, then you can kind of get a little overwhelmed with the message. But if you're just wanting to go listen to some goth track or to listen to have kind of a renaissance of industrial music, and you're craving something new in a genre that is kind of gone along, you could go unearth all your old KMFDM records if you want, or you can go check out a new band. And Houses of Heaven, this is their debut album. It will be out on May 22nd, called Silent Places. So I mean, if this is kind of your jam, then this is something that you can go check out. And again, like, not everything is going to fit into everyone's, accounting box, if you will, for what they want to listen to. But I feel like this is a nice way to kind of resurrect some of that old industrial goth feeling that I remember enjoying 20 years ago now. And some of that is about, that may have been my way to deal with anxiety or fear or whatever at the time that I was listening to it, and kind of dealing with whatever was going on in my head, coming up on 20 years. That could have been like a September 11th or something like that I just kind of needed some kind of musical outlet, and that was what I chose. But I feel like a lot of what and I'm kind of sensing a theme with some of the stuff that we chose for this week, is kind of dealing with a lot of those anxieties and fears. And I also feel like the next track, Braids, Snow Angel, is another track that really encompasses a lot of those anxieties and fears, and kind of deals with it with an opening in the same way that even Ali Holder's track kind of deals with, where it's like, I'm storytelling and I've got my perspective here at this end, and by the end of the song I get to a completely different place emotionally. It's just that this one takes it a way different direction.
with Braids and Snow Angel, it's off their upcoming Shadow Offering. That Shadow Offering album has been delayed until June 19th. It's going to be out on Secret City Records. This is a Montreal-based indie trio. This is a 9-minute track. And normally when you think a 9-minute track, you're saying, okay, you better do something profound, or this is just going to be that Metallica moment where the intro was great, but now really we're just going to skip. Don't skip this track. Don't skip Snow Angel by Braids. It's 9 minutes long, but it doesn't feel like it's a 9-minute track by any means. It's based on the 2016 U.S. election, which they put it as our collective conscience took a sharp inhale. It's just this sense of uncertainty and this self-reflection is kind of what I felt from this. And they're from Montreal, and I had to point out that right after the 2016 election, got a message from Stephen Wright, the drummer of the Marvelous Bohunks, who, for those who are wondering, the Marvelous Bohunks are the theme song for the Nanobot rock mixtape. But Stephen Wright messaged me, and he had asked me about the 2000 election as well. So it kind of, when we circled back to this song now 4 years later, it really raised the questions of, are Canadians kind of collectively thinking the same thing about the United States? Like, is there something that we don't know when we're in the United States that maybe the Canadians are just going, what happened? Maybe they've got their finger on the pulse much more than we do. It must be a Canadian thing.
Well, no, I think every country out there is thinking the same thing. I just think the Canadians are more polite about it.
With Justin and the politeness.
Sorry.
Thanks for the poutine. Keep that coming. But with Braids, Snow Angel, I'm going to put a thought in everybody's head right now that you're not going to be able to shake. And you're welcome for this. This track was produced by Chris Walla, the same producer for Death Cab for Cutie.
Yeah.
Unhear Death Cab for Cutie in this song.
You can't.
You can't. But I bring it up, one, so everybody knows it, but you can't unhear the similar vein, and you're quite welcome for that. But Snow Angel is, it really just, it captivated me in 9 minutes. And it, like I said, it didn't feel like 9 minutes, but it comes across as this story, this intimate look into one's thoughts, no matter how just, I guess we should say normal they may be, to how uncertain they may be. So it's this normalcy to uncertainty that I think bridges across this 9 minutes. And I think Braids does a phenomenal job of capturing this sense of nervous uncertainty, all while kind of going about your day and doing the normal stuff in almost a way, to me.
I'm a backer with a cutter and a
And as we've brought up multiple times this episode, not sure why, but it's just come up. I grew up in Maine, which is relatively near Montreal, and the winters that occur in that region of North America are rough. They're dark, they're depressing, they're cold. Like, you can easily just get really lonely during that time, which I think is what kind of the track starts out with a lot. Just her talking about killing her plant by overwatering it, and the
normalcy I was pointing
yeah,
yeah.
And that falling tripping and falling on the stairs, and basically just lying there for a little bit and pretending you're a snow angel, because it just kind of makes that lonely moment more romantic, where you're just like, I'm lying on the ground making snow angels, isn't this great? And you're just secretly just like screaming inside during this whole time. And yeah, this whole track captures so much of that psyche so well. And you brought up the 2016 election, and it's funny that a band from Canada basically captured our collective thought about that so well, which is basically just like this is not okay, this is not normal, and all of the anxiety that comes with that, and that they're doing it in this 9-minute track, which you're exactly right, does not feel like 9 minutes. And maybe that's because there's like several acts to the song as they're going along, and there's a very clean, calm guitar tone at the beginning of the song that's just kind of setting everything up. But then once it breaks into there's a section where Raphael Standell Preston just breaks into this complete spoken word about everything that's going on in her mind, and you just listen to it, and it starts out very calm, very peaceful, like, I'm thinking of my first lover's kiss and the beauty of nature and all this stuff. And it's like you can see that she's trying to start in this very positive moment, but then, as you can in these, when you're just alone with your thoughts, like, they just kind of start spiraling into wider turns, and it gets more frayed and it gets more frantic, and then the guitars pick that up as well, and you kind of get those tones going, and then her voice ends up becoming more frayed and more frantic, and there's just so much of this tension going on. And I'm listening to this whole thing, and but she's just lying on the ground pretending she's a snow angel. So on the exterior, you're just seeing this calm person, but on the inside, there's just all of this screaming going on in your head, and it just builds and builds and builds, and like to the point where when you get that last line where she's talking about like going and buying some new clothes that everyone loves, and she's just like, it's $20 at H&M, baby.
This song reminds me of Porridge Radio's Circling and the build-up. It stirs in its own build-up that becomes more and more intense, but at about little after 7 minutes, 7 minutes, 5 seconds, somewhere in there, it just drops. And then it lives in this lighter sense of realization, and this plea to want to come down and, quote, get off, can I get off this ride, is what she sings. And it speaks to the confusion we find ourselves in, as you pointed out, with that whole, things are going to happen that we have no control over, and it's not the most ideal outcome for what some people may have wanted. But at the same sense, you're going to have to keep doing what you're doing. And I think that Snow Angel is an apt track for both, yes, the 2016 election, but also kind of what we're dealing with right now in this coronavirus stay-at-home situation, is that it doesn't go the way that you want, but you have to adapt and you have to put a smile on your face. And I think the theme through all of these tracks is that you do lean into those thoughts, and it's okay. It's okay to think about that. If people come out of this whole thing without 10 new hobbies and they just survive this, that is enough. You just take care of you, and I think that is a profound piece to this. And this track doesn't leave us feeling helpless. Doesn't really make me feel confused at the end either, but she sings the track, "Am I only just realizing the injustice that exists, cloaked in white privilege since the day I was born? Blinders on, blinders on." And it's that sense of just throw up the blinders and it all goes away. It doesn't. This all exists. These thoughts all exist. And I think Snow Angel encapsulates that and does so in a very, very relatable but ultimately profound way.
Yeah, I feel like going through the psyche of this song, we already talked about it, just, the anxiety and all of that we're in this world right now. Like, this was a great moment, almost like a teachable moment, to just say, like, you're not alone. And, if you're dealing with these tough thoughts, and we may not even realize the people that are having these tough thoughts. And that's why I go back to, like, there's this person lying on the ground being completely calm in a Snow Angel like fashion, but all of these thoughts are going on in their head. If you need to check in on someone, check in on someone. And if you're having a really hard time with this, talk to someone. You're not alone, and we will get through this together.
Clay, we are at the end of our April mixtape, and I think that there's a lot that we've experienced and discussed throughout these tracks. The one thing that I want to say to everybody, and this goes beyond the current COVID-19 situation, and it's what you had pointed out just a minute ago as well. It's okay to have these thoughts. You're not alone. Reach out to somebody. Send a text message to a friend. Know that we're all going to get through this, and we may be apart, but we're getting through this together. And it's okay to have these thoughts. Just know that those thoughts don't have to be you, that it's absolutely okay. And one way that I like to do that is I like to talk about music. I love to experience music. I like to share music. So if you find a song that absolutely speaks to you and you feel like you don't have anybody to share that with, share it with us. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. You can email us at info@nanobotrock.com. Let us know. We'd love to chat music with you. You can reach out to us. Keep listening to local and independent music. Keep supporting local and independent artists. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next time.